Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Apothecary and welcome back to my channel. I am back with another episode of Battle of the Books 2024 edition. Today we're doing all of round 3. I have 15 matchups for this round, so I'm just going to do them all in one go in one video. A couple notes before we get started. First, all of my video reviews and descriptions from Goodreads will be linked down in the description below. So if you want to know more information about any of these books, you can find that in the description below. Just look for the book title. And also, all of these books in this video have now either made it through round 1 and round 2, or had a buy in round 1 and were in round 2, so you've heard about all of these books in one of the other videos. If you missed those videos, they will also be linked down in the description below. So without further ado, let's just jump right in with our first matchup. That is the Bloodstones versus an Unkindness of Magicians. We're starting off with a hard one as it is. The Bloodstones is an Asian-inspired fantasy with some schooling and teaching, which is one of my favorite tropes. I love the mentor-mentee trope. It's one of my favorites and I eat it up every time. And this is by one of my favorite indie authors, Tori Tecking. So my heart is instantly pulled towards that book. An Unkindness of Magicians was a dark YA fantasy that takes place in New York with kind of magicians going amok. There's wars between different magician clans or groups, however you want to call them, and it was really interesting to see the different types of magic that was being used in this book, and it was really intriguing. I can't wait to continue that series, but I think this one I'm going to give to Tori Tecking and the Bloodstones because I really can't wait to see what she does with book 2 in that one. Next up is a classic, The Three Musketeers versus Small Favor. We've got swashbuckling, musketeer, sword fighting, romance, all sorts of shenanigans, and Harry Dresden. This one I'm going to give to The Three Musketeers. I did both of these books on an immersion read, and while y'all know I love Dresden and I will always be a Dresden fan, I think I'm going to give this one to Three Musketeers because doing an immersion read with this book made the entire difference for me. Whereas I can read Dresden in any format, any way, and I will still love it. Pairing this up with I think it was John Lee as the narrator of this audiobook. He's one of my favorite classic audiobook narrators. I'm going to give the nod to John Lee here because he made all the difference for me in this book. I would have enjoyed it either way, but I enjoyed it 10 times more having him narrate it in his different voices for all the musketeers, and it helped kind of distinguish between all of the different musketeers and the different characters that we encountered, because there's a lot of characters in the Three Musketeers, and being able to have different voices for each one in the audiobook really helped me be able to distinguish it while I was reading it. So this round I'm going to give to the Three Musketeers. Next up we have The Force Unleashed, which was a Dark Side Star Wars book based on, I think it comes in between 2 of the main Star Wars movies, but I forget which ones. Basically, Darth Vader has an apprentice that he's sending out to control or kill the Master Jedis. And so it was really interesting to see the story from that point of view. Versus The Queen's Gambit, which was a historical fiction book about a young chess protege, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to watch that. Is it a movie or a TV show? I can never remember which is which. I can't wait to watch it because listen to the audiobook of that, and the narrator really brought that main character to life, but I want to see all the other characters too. So this one I'm going to give to The Queen's Gambit because that really held my interest throughout the whole book, and you can ask John, I talked about that book a lot after I finished it. Next up we have Agent as the Stars, which is an indie science fiction book, versus Blackcap, which was a Sphinx novella I read. It's a dark noir kind of, our main character is kind of a investigative sleuth kind of retired, kind of brought back from retiree. I had a lot of questions with Blackcap, but as you've heard in previous videos, I've absolutely loved Ancient as the Stars, and I can't wait to read the companion novel that comes out later this year for that one. So this one I'm going to give to Ancient as the Stars, and Maya will be so excited. She's been watching these videos and watching where her book lands and who she goes up against and how it advances, and she's going to be excited to see that Ancient as the Stars has survived yet another round. Next up, we have I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones versus The Children of the Black Moon by Joseph John Lee. This one, even though I love Joseph John Lee's series and his characters are so heartrending and the storytelling is so imaginative and descriptive, I love it, and I will not say a single bad thing about that series. I have to give this one to Stephen Graham Jones because he completely changed the slasher series with I Was a Teenage Slasher. The ending of that book is unlike anything that ever happened, and this is kind of my first experience with slashers and only my second experience with Stephen Graham Jones, but this book made Stephen Graham Jones an auto-buy author for me, whereas Joseph John Lee was kind of already an auto-buy author for me based on my experiences with him. So I'm going to give this one to I Was a Teenage Slasher. Next up, we have We Solve Murders versus Upscaled, which is another Joseph John Lee book. This one is a hard one because I love We Solved Murders by Richard Osman. I listened to the audiobook version of this and it was so much fun. It's obviously a murder mystery. There's a couple different mysteries going on, and our main characters are one retired detective and one current active duty detective, and some really, really great character writing in that one. Upscaled is like a YA, maybe children's fantasy book about a baby dragon who's just trying to have a birthday party. And I'm going to give this one to Upscaled because as soon as I saw this cover, I thought, oh man, is Lee gonna make us cry over this dang baby dragon? And while I did have some tears reading this book, I think they were more happy tears, less sad tears, and it showed that Joseph John Lee can write in different genres. Well, I guess it's all still fantasy, but different ways of writing in different genres. You can have the Gunslingers and Spellbinders series, which is a very serious, heartrending historical fantasy, and Upscaled, which is heartwarming and adorable, and I loved it. So this round is going to Upscaled because it really showed the dynamic of Joseph John Lee's writing, whereas We Solve Murders was different but same kind of writing from Richard Osman. Next up, we have The Wishing Stone by Adam Holcomb versus The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is a fantasy novella about the second novella in the Gam Gam series about a necromancer grandma called Gam Gam and her little adopted granddaughter apprentice Amina, and is adorable, and I love it and I highly recommend it. But I think this one has to go to The Diviners because sparked my interest for the 1920s. I was there at one of the locations just as I was finishing this book, which was an amazing experience. Just happened to work out that way, complete coincidence. And I just loved The Diviners, and I can't wait to continue with that series. So this matchup goes to The Diviners by Libba Bray. They're getting harder as they come. This is expected as we get closer to the finale, but man, some of these matchups are really hard. This next one is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynn Weaver versus Silverskin by Katie Cooper. This is so hard because these two books not only are so different from each other, but are so different from anything I have ever read before. And that's usually one of my biggest things in moving a book on, is how different it is from other books. Butcher and Blackbird was the serial killer smut romance that completely caught me out of left guard. It was so different. It was so much fun. and I really need to continue in that series. Silverskin was a supernatural, what do you call that? Science fiction, fantasy. I'm never really sure where to put supernatural books in because I feel like they could fit in either way. Y'all watching this, let me know in the comments below, what genre do you place the supernatural in? I'm tempted to just create its own genre and just call it the supernatural genre because that feels like it fits best. Is it fantasy? Is it science fiction? Or is it just its own thing? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, Silverskin took place in, I think it was Alaska, and it was so unique in its setting and its story of these supernatural creatures coming to life and taking over these towns and feeding on their anguish and their grief and their fears. It was so exciting to read, and I really hope that Katie Cooper writes more. I forget if this was book 1 in a series or if this is a standalone, but if Katie's watching this, I need more books in this world. This one, however, I think I'm going to give it to Butcher and Blackbird because that made me, even though my TBR didn't allow it, that made me want to pick up book 2 instantly. Our next matchup is How to Seal Your Own Fate versus The Gathering Storm. This is a Kristen Perrin book 2 in the Castle Knowles series versus a Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson, Robin Jordan story. I think if I remember correctly, The Gathering Storm was my favorite read in the Wheel of Time series. I might be remembering wrong. They all kind of blend together. I really enjoyed The Gathering Storm, but this one I'm going to give to Kristen Perrin and How to Seal Your Own Fate because her series is just so unique. Speaking of Kristen Perrin, our next matchup is How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin, which is book 1 in that series, versus The Garden Gnome by Jeff McIntyre. Now, I loved The Garden Gnome by Jeff McIntyre. Bob the Gnome was amazing. The whole world that Jeff McIntyre creates in this book is fantastic, but I beta read and now I am proofreading book 2 in that series. I think it's called The M Word. And y'all, I think book 2 is even better than book 1. And so I'm going to give this match up to Kristen Perrin also for How to Solve Your Own Murder because that book was so funny. It made me laugh. It was so suspenseful. It had me on the edge of the seat and I couldn't wait to read the next book in that series. Which means that eventually, I think maybe the next round or the round after that, depending on how they go, we may get a Kristen Perrin versus Kristen Perrin matchup, which is always exciting to me. Our next matchup is 2 Dresden books, actually, which is so... I get excited for these matchups because I'm like, especially when I read such long series like Dresden or The Wheel of Time or even Outlander, I'm always wondering when these books are going to come head to head. And now is the time. We have Deadbeat, which is a Dresden novel, versus Downtown, which is a Dresden graphic novel. And just for the sake of having more Dresden in the novel than in the graphic novel, I'm going to give this one to Deadbeat, although I loved seeing Dresden in graphic novel format, and I get excited whenever another one comes up on my Dresden rating list because it's so fun to see that played out in the graphic novel form. This one's going to go to Deadbeat because we get more Dresden in the novels. Really, that's my reason for picking it. So next up we have The Crimes of Rooker Flynn versus Bounty by J.D. Cunningham. This is book 1 in the Jill Anderson series, and if y'all watched my previous videos, Bounty I didn't talk a lot about because I didn't remember quite so much, but it was up against Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, and that book did not jive with me at all. So this kind of got an automatic bid to the next round just because of who it was up against. So Bounty is a science fiction kind of cyborg vigilante. By day, Jill Anderson is one of Baltimore's best detectives. At night, she is a cyborg vigilante trying to take down an evil scientist, Dr. Trent Robert. At the beginning of the book, he is pulled out of the water dead. And now she's got to figure out who killed him and why. So I really enjoyed Bounty. I gave it, I think, 4 out of 5 stars. I want to read more in that series because I'm intrigued on how her cyborg powers work and how she balances this night and day lives together. But I think I'm going to give this one to The Crimes of Rooker Flynn because that was such a fun read, and I believe book 2 just came out or is about to come out, and I was supposed to read that a lot earlier. I did not get around to it because life got in the way, but I can't wait to see where Rooker Flynn and Blackjack's adventures go in the Institute. So this round goes to The Crimes of Rooker Flynn. Just a couple matches left, so hang in there. Next up is another hard one, really hard one. This is Becky Lynch, the man, not your average girl, versus A Lady for a Duke. This is so hard, y'all. Why do I do this to myself? Becky Lynch's memoir, I absolutely loved. I did an immersion read of that. I pre-ordered that. Actually, John pre-ordered that for me for my birthday last year. And I'd still talk about that book today. A Lady for a Duke was a romance with a trans character as the main character. And it was completely unique compared to anything I've ever read before. While I loved A Lady for a Duke and I want to read more like it, I have to give this one to Becky because I still talk about that book today. And it was just so good, especially for a celebrity memoir, but that's not the only reason why. Becky wrote that book while being a main event WWE superstar on the road most of the year, a first-time mother, and a whole bunch of other side gigs going on. She was getting ready to main event WrestleMania, which is huge in their world. And as I said in my review of this book, her WrestleMania entrance was her book. She was reading bits from her book and they had like this giant screen of it. And her gear, her outfit, had quotes from the book all over it. And I just loved it. It made it an amazing experience for me. Just 3 more matchups left in this round. We have A Grave for Us All by Michael Roberti, which is book 2 in the Crown and Tide series, versus Legacy of Brick and Bone by Crystal Matar, which is also book 2 in the Tainted Dominion series. This one, as much as I love A Grave for Us All, and I can't wait to see what Roberti gives us next, because each one of his books gets better as he continues writing them. This one I'm going to give to Legacy of Brick and Bone because, y'all, that book, in my eyes, was the perfect book too, and I am obsessed with Crystal Matar's writing, and I can't wait to see what they give us next. So this one goes to Legacy of Brick and Bone. Next up, we have Evershore by Brandon Sanderson and Jancy Patterson. This is a Skyward novella. This is the 3rd and I think final novella in that series. I love this series so much. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson is my favorite Brandon Sanderson series that I have read so far. I don't know what it is about that, especially being science fiction. I tend to not gravitate towards it, but maybe because it's YA science fiction, so it's easier to handle. I just love it. I love our characters. I need more Emba in my life, and I love it. Legion of the Lost is book 3 in the Gunslingers and Spellbinders series by Joseph John Lee. Yes, another Joseph John Lee book. Apparently, like 2024 was my Joseph John Lee reading year. This was the final book in that series, and it was so good. This one I'm going to give to Legion of the Lost because this one woke up some emotions in me that had been sleeping for a long time, where Evershore, I loved it, but I still have more to go in that series, and I enjoy those books more and more as the books go on. So I'm going to give this one to Legion of the Lost. And our last matchup of round 3 is The Anatomy of Fear, which is the collection of horror, dark fantasy, grimdark short stories by indie authors versus Beach Read by Emily Henry, a fantastic romance book. I love The Anatomy of Fear. It was so different and each story was so unique on itself. But this one I'm going to give to Beach Read because there were some unexpected things happening in that book, and it made me laugh and it made me cry, and made me want to read more of Emily Henry's books. So this one I'm going to give to Beach Read. But if you are a horror indie fan, you will definitely want to pick up The Anatomy of Fear, because there's some really, really incredible short stories in that collection. So that is round 3 of my Battle of the Books 2024 edition. This was such a hard round to do. There were some incredible matchups here. If any of these piqued your interest, I highly recommend going to check them out. They've battled through 2 rounds so far against other books, and they've made it to round 3. So even if they didn't make it past this round, they still deserve the kudos of being amazing books. And I can't wait for you all to read these books if you haven't yet. If you have read these books, or at least some of them, let me know which books you've read in the comments below, and what were your thoughts of these books. Let me know which choices surprised you and which ones you would have picked if you had to go and do this video yourself. As always, keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back. Bye.